Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order, please. I want to say welcome to March 6th meeting of St. John's Common Council. Monday of March break. Councillor Sullivan is away for March break. We have a fairly light agenda this evening. I think we have only 276 pages. It's pretty good. So I'll ask I'm going to hand this over actually to the deputy right away for a land acknowledgement. Deputy, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. The land on which the city of St. John, or Maniquest, is situated is the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik. The Wolastoqiyik, along with their indigenous neighbors, the Mi'kmaq and Pescatamaquati, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s that protected their rights to lands and resources. Let us pause to reflect.
I'll ask everyone to please stand for the national anthem. Okay, City Clerk, over to you for the next item.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item is the approval of the agenda, and we have one proposed addition with respect to Rapid Housing Initiative, and that would be item 17.1 on the agenda.
Okay, I'll take a mover and a seconder, the deputy and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. How about the minutes?
Next, Your Worship, we have minutes of February the 21st.
Minutes of Feb 21, Councillor Hickey, or Councillor Harris, Councillor Radwan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
And next, minutes of February the 27th.
Minutes of Feb 27, Councillor Killen and Councillor Harris on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next item is disclosure of conflict of interest, if there are any.
Councillor Radwan.
Yes, Mayor, I'm going to declare a conflict on 5.4 again.
5.4, okay. Thank you. All right, so moving on to the next item.
So, Your Worship, given that a conflict was declared on one of the consent items, that should be removed from the agenda.
Okay, so we'll
And that
remove
would become 14.1, so we would remove 5.4,
14.1, okay.
and it's now 14.1.
All right. Yep, then I'll send it over to you, Deputy, for the consent agenda, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, I would move 5.1 to 5.3, and 5.5 to 5.8, please.
Counselor Stewart is the seconder. On the question, Counselor Lowe.
Yeah, 5.1. This project is a project that have been delayed for a year now, and I think we owe thanks to Kevin McDonald, the Catholic Diocese, the Knights of Columbus. This is 56 units at the corner of Cliff and Waterloo, of which 28 are affordable housing. It's going to start April the 1st. Shovels will be in the ground April the 1st. It's a vacant lot. And like I said, it's going to have a daycare center that's already been approved by the province, right? So these are the people that we should thank for this.
Thank you, Counselor. Yes, it's a great project. Nice to see it coming to fruition. Counselor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a comment on 5.8 for the street naming. I was really happy to see UNB making a recommendation to name one of the streets after Abraham Walker, who was a great UNB alumni and he broke many records for our Black community. He's been quite an inspiration. So just want to send out a shout out to UNB. I think it's just wonderful.
Thank you. Actually, before I call the vote, I want to read this little thing about Abraham Beverly Walker, because tonight in our kit, you will also see that we have a proclamation for the elimination of racial discrimination. We just came out of Black History Month, so with the indulgence of my counsel, I'm going to just read through this really quickly. It's in the kit for anyone who would like to have a look at it as well. Abraham Beverly Walker was a civil rights pioneer in New Brunswick and North America and deserves recognition for his notable achievements, says Dr. Paul Mazerol, NB President and Vice Chancellor. Walker was not only the first Canadian-born Black lawyer, but also an alumnus of UNB Law and its first Black student. Born on August 23, 1851 in Belle Isle, New Brunswick, to farmer William Walker and Patience Taylor, Walker's loyalist ancestor was among the first Black people to settle on the Kingston Peninsula upriver from St. John in 1786, 1 year after we became incorporated as a city. He is best known as a lawyer, journalist, and activist. As a teenager, Abraham Walker worked as a stenographer and toured Canada with noted phrenologist Orson Squire Fowler and Samuel Roberts Wells. Walker went on to study at the National University in Washington, D.C., before returning to St. John to study in the legal office of George Godfrey Gilbert. In June 1881, Walker was admitted as an attorney of the Supreme Court of New Brunswick. In October of 1882, Walker was the first Black student to enroll at St. John Law School, which is now the UNB Faculty of Law. We are pleased that such a notable UNB Law alumnus is being recognized on the UNB St. John campus, says UNB Law Dean Michael Marin. In 2021, UNB Law created the Abraham Walker Scholarship for a Black student in the first year of the JD program. It makes sense that we continue to honor his legacy to New Brunswick and to UNB. After being admitted to the bar in 1882, Walker opened his own law office on Princess Street in St. John, which ultimately failed, due in part because of racism. Because despite being highly educated and influential, Walker faced insurmountable discrimination and systemic racism. For example, he was excluded from local events for solicitors. In 1895, the Afro-Canadian community of St. John nominated Walker for a Queen's Counsel appointment, which was ultimately denied. Historical documents indicate that Walker attributed this to racial discrimination. Walker asked Attorney General Andrew McKeon for an appointment as a provincial King's Counsel, but was also denied. Walker was a man ahead of his time. He fought for racial equality and is what we would today consider a civil rights activist. He advocated for universal suffrage and spoke against governments for their racism. Peter Little, the author of Abraham Beverly Walker, lawyer, lecturer, activist, credits Walker with having said, a man should not be measured by his race, nor his color, nor his creed, but by the size of his soul, his heart, and his mind. Walker founded and edited Neath, the first African-Canadian literary magazine, which focused on racial issues and gave a forum to Black writers in and out of Atlantic Canada. Neath, although lasting only a few issues, once again, due to racism and a lack of readership, is credited as a primary source of radical Black politics within Canadian discourse. Walker lectured extensively across North America, and while lecturing in Ontario, he became ill with tuberculosis, which ultimately led to his death in 1909. Until recently, despite being a St. John local, Walker had become a forgotten part of New Brunswick history. In 2019, the government of New Brunswick honored him with an Order of New Brunswick. In 2021, the New Brunswick Black History Society unveiled a headstone to mark Walker's grave in the Church of England Cemetery on Thorne Avenue in St. John. In 2022, a plaque with Walker's story was installed at the St. John Law Courts. So I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, team. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 6, members' comments.
Members' comments. Councillor Radwan, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make mention that there's a lot of tax clinics going on to try to help some people to get their taxes completed, and one of them is taking place for any of our newcomers, permanent residents, at the St. John Newcomers Center at 75 Prince William Street. I also wanted to mention that there is language conversation classes that both take place at the Newcomers Center in Prude, and it came to my knowledge recently that there's a lot of people that don't realize, but the formal weekly classes actually take place at the YMCA, so there's been a little bit of confusion about that. I also wanted to mention that I actually went over and I was graciously welcomed to volunteer over at our Eastside Food Bank. And Councillor Stewart, you might be interested in knowing too, in January, 1,150 people were served just for the East Side. Takes up all of Ward 4 and just parts of Ward 3. They do have lots of needs like canned tomatoes, oatmeal, rice, garbage bags, things like that. If people want to drop off anything to them, they're there Tuesday and Fridays from 12 till 3. And the church over there actually has a clothing bank, so people can walk in on those days and take free clothes. They have different sections. I got a tour, women's, children, and men's clothing, and they have a nurse come in once a month that help people with healthy eating options, changing dressings if they need them, getting vaccines, and quite a bit more things that she's doing. So that was wonderful to see that over in the East Side. What a great bunch of volunteers. So a big thank you to them. And I just wanted on a happy note to mention that I ran into the owners of Galbraith Electronics, and they have been open over in Ward 1 for 45 years of business. So congratulations to them. It's integral to have these businesses in our community.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Killen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Happy Women's History Month and happy International Women's Day, which is happening this Wednesday, to my fellow councillor and Your Worship, yourself. So I really appreciate it. I'll be getting to raise the flag for International Women's Day Wednesday at 10 a.m. On behalf of Mayor Reardon, and be sharing what International Women's Day means to us both. And I think to a lot of women, and that, you know, we have come a long way. It's not even so many years ago we wouldn't be able to sit here, although St. John has a very strong history of women mayors and councillors. So we're kind of lucky that way to have a lot of great representation in our past. But there's many women that came before that did not have the opportunity to do so, and we will be appreciating them this month and on this day. There's also going to be a display at the city market. Employees have been working together to look at different activities and initiatives, so check that out. There's a theme this year, which is #EmbraceEquity. So there's a bunch of notes actually that will be in the market that display sort of the staff's and employees' feelings on the day and what it means. So great wraparound celebration of it in all respects. So thanks to staff for that.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Congrats to the St. John Police and the leadership team there for the launch of the online crime reporting interface. It's available on their on the St. John Police Force website, which is new and improved. So you can check that out. So if, for instance, you had something under a specific dollar amount go missing, stolen. Could be broken window, something that is of a non-urgent or non-emergency type of crime and you don't want to wait around for patrol to show up, you can submit that, get a file number for insurance purposes, so that doesn't hold you up, and get immediate notification. If an officer does need to circle back and connect with you, they certainly will do so, but from a customer-facing standpoint, it does improve our level of service there, and also feeds into our crime reporting data so that we have a better indication of what is happening in our community. In many cases, those types of crimes go unreported. So with better data comes better services, and better services comes a healthier community. So thank you to them and to all involved. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Tonight, I'm going to read two proclamations, one about the elimination of racism and the other one to announce that March is Kidney Month. So I just want to mention that the body has several involuntary systems that work, and that means they work without you commanding them to work. So I just have a few here that I'll highlight. You have a heating and cooling system that's working all the time. You have a pumping system that's working all the time. You have an air exchange system. You have a digestive system. And you have a waste management system, and that's that involves your kidneys. And so they balance your fluids and your waste product in the body. And as waste products accumulate in the body, they become toxic. So you can't live without your kidneys. So the two things that would impact kidney disease the most would be high blood pressure and diabetes. So you need to look after yourself. I'm getting around to food here. And you need to be careful what you're eating. So you need to watch your intake of sodium, especially if you have high blood pressure, and if you have diabetes, you have to make sure that you try to maintain your weight. So it's just interesting that the body is a very complex system. It runs on its own, but we need to look after it. We need to exercise it, need to take care of it. So I'll talk more about that, I guess, when I read my proclamation. Thank you very much. And City Clerk, over to you for the next item.
Next on the agenda, Your Worship, are two proclamations. The first one is 7.1, and this is for International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination.
The City of St. John is committed to the belief that equal opportunity and treatment should exist for all people. And whereas every resident of the City of St. John has the right to realize their potential, regardless of race, color, nationality, or ethnic origin, and live at all times in conditions of dignity, respect, and peace. And whereas the General Assembly of the United Nations has designated March 21st as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and whereas in Canada, this date is an opportunity to reflect on the fact that while progress has been made, Indigenous peoples, racialized communities, and religious minorities in Canada continue to face racism and discrimination every day. It is also a day to recommit our efforts to combat all forms of racial discrimination, injustice, systemic racism, and hate, to ensure a world where everyone is respected, safe, and has equitable access to contribute meaningfully to all aspects of society. And whereas it is important for people everywhere to strengthen and consolidate their voices against racism, to mobilize against all forms and manifestations of racial discrimination and injustice, and to ensure a safe environment for those who speak up. And whereas the elimination of racism and racial discrimination can be accomplished through the understanding and respect and the dignity of all people, and is the social and moral responsibility of each person. Therefore, I, Mayor Donna Node Reardon of St. John, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, March 21, 2023, as International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in the City of St. John. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 7.2. It's a proclamation with respect to Kidney Month.
Whereas each day, 1 in 10 Canadians learn that their kidneys have failed, and this number is on the rise, with 45% of new kidney patients under the age of 65. Their survival will depend on dialysis treatments or a kidney transplant. In 2022, kidney disease was the 10th leading cause of death in Canada. And whereas the Kidney Foundation of Canada is the only national health charity serving the needs of people living with kidney disease through funding research, educational and emotional support programs, promoting access to high-quality health care, and actively promoting awareness and of commitment to kidney health and organ donation. And whereas March 9th, 2023 is World Kidney Day, the Kidney Foundation Atlantic Branch aims to raise awareness of the importance of our kidneys to our overall health and to reduce the frequency and impact of kidney disease and its associated health problems. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Donna Node-Reardon of St. John, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2023 as Kidney Month in the City of St. John. I urge all residents to become aware of their own kidney health and to learn about the role the kidneys play, warning signs to look for, as well as awareness of organ donation registry. Next item, City Clerk.
Your worship, just looking at the time here, I'm not sure if there'll be enough time for our presenters so before the public hearing takes place. So
Okay.
I would suggest we just move on to the later parts of the agenda
All right.
prior to the public hearing. So the first item I would recommend to be considered is under consideration of bylaws, and it's item 10.1 on your agenda. And this would be third reading for a bylaw respecting the powers and duties of the Chief Administrative Officer of the City of St. John.
General Counsel, I'm passing that over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council. Section 81 of the Local Governance Act provides that the CAO of a local government has the powers and duties council prescribes by bylaw. Traditionally, however, in St. John, the top leadership position has been referred to as the city manager position. The CAO, Chief Administrative Officer bylaw, is intended to align the title of the city's top leadership position with the terminology in the Local Governance Act and to establish and define the powers of the CAO. And with that, I'll hand it over to the clerk for the appropriate motion.
Okay, City Clerk, over to you for the appropriate motions.
Yes, so your worship, two motions required here. The approved third reading by summary and then by title.
Approved third reading by summary. I've got the deputy and Councillor Killen on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A bylaw respecting the powers and duties of the Chief Administrative Officer of the City of St. John. And this can be described as the Chief Administrative Officer bylaw is intended to align the title of the city's top leadership position, formerly known as City Manager position, with the terminology of the Local Governance Act. The proposed bylaw is also intended to establish and define the powers of the Chief Administrative Officer. To align with the terminology of the Act, the position is now called CAO position. For certainty purposes, the proposed bylaw clarifies that any reference to city manager in any city document, policy, agreement, or other instrument shall mean CAO. The proposed bylaw also defines the authority of the CAO. Specifically, the proposed bylaw provides that the CAO has authority to designate an acting CAO, hire for all staff positions of the city, approve payment in lieu of notice for termination of employment, provided the payment is within the city's approved budget, and approve severance pay to city employees, provided said payment is within the city's approved budget. And now a separate motion by title for third reading.
Motion by title for third reading. Councillor Hickey, Councillor Killen on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A bylaw respecting the powers and duties of the Chief Administrative Officer of the City of St. John.
Next item.
Next is 10.2, and this is a third reading for a zoning bylaw amendment with Section 59 conditions for 54 to 58 Broad Street and 57 Broadview Avenue.
CAO, passing it over to you for intro.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council, before you for third reading is a rezoning application with Section 39 conditions that was submitted by Kaleidoscope Social Impact for a property located at 58 Broad Street and 67 Broadview Avenue. The application involves a rezoning from neighborhood community facility to urban center residential to permit affordable housing development. The application did receive first and second reading on February 21st, 2023, following the required public hearing. All applicable requirements under the Community Planning have been satisfied, and council is now in a position to move forward with third reading. And with that, I'll turn it back over to your worship and the clerk for the required motions.
City Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. In this case, 4 motions are required. The first one is to approve the reading in its entirety.
Approve reading by entirety. Councillor Lowe? Councillor Hickey on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. The zoning bylaw of the City of St. John enacted on the 15th day of December 2014 is amended by amending Schedule A, the zoning map of the City of St. John by rezoning a parcel of land having an area of approximately 400 square meters located at 58 Broad Street and 67 Broadview Avenue, also identified as a portion of PID 550630067 and 0000224 from neighborhood community facility to urban center residential pursuant to a resolution adopted by council under Section 59 of the Community Planning Act. And so for the second motion, Your Worship, it's to rescind the previous Section 39 condition.
Rescind previous Section 39s. Councillor Harrison, the deputy on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Next motion is to approve the new Section 59 condition.
Approve the new Section 59s. Councillor Radwan and Councillor Ogden on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
And lastly, we require motion to approve third reading by title.
Approve third reading by title. Councillor Ogden and the deputy on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 10.3. This is a zoning bylaw text amendment for converted accommodation.
Okay, over to you, Commissioner Hamilton, CAO.
Your worship, members of council, before you for third reading is a zoning bylaw amendment application, which was submitted by Iron Gate Construction Services for amendments to establish provisions for converted accommodation uses. The application would permit the conversion of hotel and motel buildings into dwelling units as of right in certain commercial zones in order to facilitate the provision of affordable housing. The application did receive first and second reading on February 21st, 2023, following the required public hearing. All applicable requirements of the Community Planning Act have been satisfied, and council is now in a position to move forward with third reading. And with that, I'll turn it back over to your worship and clerk for the required motions.
City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Only 2 motions required here. First motion is to approve by summary the third reading, and then a motion by title.
Approved by summary. Councillor Stewart and Councillor Lowe on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John. This amendment will establish a new land use definition for converted accommodation to enable the conversion of an existing accommodation establishments into dwelling units and to add the use to uptown commercial, business park commercial, commercial corridor, and general commercial zones. The proposed use will facilitate the conversion of accommodation structures into dwelling units in a number of commercial zones. This will help facilitate the development of new dwelling units, including affordable housing units, to meet the city's established housing needs. And now final motion to approve by title, Your Worship.
Approve reading by title. Councillor Killen and Councillor Hickey on the question? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
All right, next item, City Clerk.
So Your Worship, it's now 6:30, and we do have a public hearing that's been advertised. And so for this item, it is a public hearing, item 9.1 on your agenda, for a proposed rescission of former Section 39 conditions. Also has a Planning Advisory Committee report and staff presentation for a property at 1382 Hickey Road.
Okay, I'll pass this over to you, CAO.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council, before you this evening for public hearing is an application submitted by U-Haul Company Canada Limited for a Section 59 amendment for a property located at 1382 Hickey Road. The application seeks to discharge a planning condition to allow for the extension of a self-storage facility on the site. The application has been evaluated by staff and the Planning Advisory Committee, and before you are recommendations to approve the application. And with that, I'm pleased to introduce Eva Matson, who's a planner with our community planning team, to deliver tonight's presentation on behalf of staff.
Thank you. So as said, this is for 1382 Hickey Road, and it's a Section 59 amendment. So the proposal would see the expansion of a self-storage facility on the property. Former conditions limited it to the southeastern portion of the site. It would also see the development of a parking lot and a new commercial building on the northern portion of the site. The former Section 59 conditions only limited the expansion of the self-storage facilities and restricted them just to the bottom corner of the southeast portion of the site. This was very common during the time to use specific proposals and specific site plans to tie Section 59 conditions to a successful rezoning, which is what happened in this case in 2003. The site is located at 1382 Hickey Road, but does have access onto Bruce Street. It is separated from the closest residential by city-owned property that's the future development. Surrounding it is also quite a few wetlands, but it is outside the buffer zone as regulated by the province. So you can see from this image of the site that the southeast portion contains some self-storage facilities that would be expanded across the southwestern portion of the site. It would just be an expansion of the current development similar in looks and size and scale. The front portion of the site in the picture would be developed parking lot and a new commercial building. So as you can see from the image, you can see the car wash on the northern eastern portion of the site, and then behind it, you can't see in this image, would be the expansion of the self-storage facilities. So the municipal plan designates this area as stable commercial. It's a part of a bit of a commercial node along Loch Lomond Road and includes a hardware store, a couple of fast food restaurants, and a couple of mechanic shops. The self-storage facilities are allowed in the zone and allowed in the municipal plan as it meets the intent. So the zoning is corridor commercial, which fits in with the municipal plan and allows for self-storage facilities. As said, the closest residential is separated by a city-owned property. I know it's really hard to see on the map, but it does create a physical separation as well as a natural berm from the elevation difference between the two. Surrounding the rest of the property is commercial to the north and then future development to the south and west. So the former Section 59 amendment, Section 59 condition to be removed was just to do with the self-storage warehouse facility, which limited it to the location on the southeast portion of the site. We would not be touching the other Section 59 conditions, which included regulations around the use of the car wash and then standard ones around site plans and stormwater management. Letters were sent to all property owners within 100 meters of the subject property on February 2nd. A public notice was posted on February 8th, and we have received no letters. Staff and PAC recommend rescinding this former Section's 59 condition and leaving the rest of them, so only removing the one imposed on Hickey Road to allow for the expansion of the self-storage facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. So what I'll do now is I'll open the public hearing, and then we'll come back to you if there's any questions from council. So I'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here or online who would like to speak against the application. I'll ask again if there's anyone here who would like to speak against this application for Hickey Road. And I'll ask for the third time if there's anyone here who would like to speak against the application. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application for Hickey Road? And I'll ask for the third time if there's anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application. Okay, so hearing from no one, I will now close the public hearing, and I will ask my team if you have any questions for staff. Seeing no questions for staff, I'll pass it over to the city clerk for the motions that are required.
Thank you, Your Worship. So in this case, just one motion required, and it's to rescind the previous Section 39 condition.
Excellent. I'll take them over. Councillor Stewart and Councillor Radwan on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
So next item is the second part to the public hearing, 9.2 on your agenda, and this is for a stop up and close portion of Newport Crescent, first and second reading.
CAO, I'll pass that over to you. Oh, sorry, I'm sending it over to you, Director Lanchel.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. This is a public hearing to consider closing a portion of Newport Crescent, 3,471 square meters. To refresh council's memory, back on December 12th, 2022, a staff report was prepared for council's consideration to initiate the street closure for this portion of Newport Crescent. In that report, council also adopted that if successfully closed, that they would sell the portion of Newport Crescent to the proponent, United Church of Canada, for $5,000, with all costs payable by the proponent. The United Church of Canada owns both sides of this portion of Newport Crescent, and if council is in agreement to stop up and close this portion, the United Church of Canada intention is to develop townhouses and a 4-story apartment building. The purpose of the hearing is to receive the views of any neighboring property owners within the area. As I understand it, no letters were received either in support or against this, and the proponent is available online also here this evening to answer any questions council may have.
All right, thank you. I'll come back to you with questions. So I will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak against this application for stop up and closure. Is there anyone here who would like to speak against the application? I'll ask for the third time if there's anyone here who would like to speak against the application. Anyone online? Okay, I'll ask if there's anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application? And I'll ask, did you want to speak in favor of the application? I have someone online up there. Can't read the name. Oh, no, sorry.
Sorry, is that me?
Yes.
I just was on the proponent. I'm just here to answer questions. I just wanted to turn my camera on just in case.
Good. Well, I'll ask if there's anyone here for the third time would like to speak in favor of the application. And I'll ask if anyone on my team has any questions for the applicant. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and I will ask my team if anyone has any questions for Director Langell. And if not, I'm going to ask the city clerk for the motions that are required.
Thank you, Your Worship. In this case, we require 2 motions: approve first reading by title and approve second reading by title.
Approve first reading by title. Deputy and Councillor Harris on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A bylaw respecting the closing of roads, streets, or highways in the city of St. John.
Okay, and I'll take a motion for a second reading by title. Councillor Lowe and Councillor Killen on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
A bylaw respecting the closing of roads, streets, or highways in the city of St. John.
Okay, thank you. Now, that has to be a record for public hearings. Okay, City Clerk, over to you for the next item.
Okay, Your Worship, next on the agenda was a presentation, 8.1, Human Development Council New Brunswick's 2022 Child Poverty Report Card. And just before proceeding, we would require a motion of council to approve this presentation, as prior approval was not sought out by council. So if, Your Worship, if you could take a vote on hearing from this presentation without prior notice.
So I'll need a motion to approve the hearing of the presentation of the deputy and Councillor Ogden on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, thank you. Deputy, I'm going to hand it over to you for the introduction.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council, tonight we have with us Chelsea Driscoll and Heather Atchison from the Human Development Council. And as you know, we are very much a data-driven organization. When we make decisions, we need to have some information to do so. And the Human Development Council does a very good job of providing us with those statistics and data. So I'd like to welcome Chelsea and Heather, and I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Probably need to stand closer.
Yes, it'd be better if you were.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think so.
Sorry about that. So thank you so much for having us here tonight to present our most recent report, the 2022 Child Poverty Report Card for New Brunswick. My name is Chelsea Driscoll, and this is my co-author, Heather Atchison.
Over 3 decades ago, the Canadian House of Commons unanimously resolved to eliminate child poverty by the year 2000. That goal remains elusive. The Human Development Council releases an annual report card in partnership with Campaign 2000 on the state of child poverty in New Brunswick. Similar provincial and territorial report cards are written by a network of organizations committed to poverty reduction and eradication across the country. These documents are a reminder of a resolution and a promise to Canadian children that have not yet been fulfilled.
So before we dive into the data specifically on New Brunswick, we just wanted to take a moment to talk through the poverty statistics, data, and measurement that we use in this report. So as I'm sure you all know, the market basket measure is the official poverty line in Canada. However, this report uses the Census Family Low Income measure throughout our report. The reason for this is that it is derived from tax filer data, which is a much larger sample size, and it allows us to burrow down deep and look at specific geographies such as the 4 wards in this city and surrounding communities. As you'll note, the Census Family Low Income measure is significantly higher than the market basket measure, but the trends move in a very similar direction. So although it is not the official measure used by the country, this measure is still very instructive.
Tax filer data reveals that approximately 1 in 8, or 13.5% of Canadian children lived in poverty in 2020. Nearly 1 million children were living in poverty across the country, which is a reduction of over 300,000 children from the previous year. This graph shows that New Brunswick had the country's 5th highest child poverty rate, and 4th if only considering the provinces and not the territories. In New Brunswick, child poverty rate decreased from 21.7% in 2019 to 16.6% in 2020. The number of children living in poverty in the province decreased from over 30,000 to 23,000. The progress in child poverty reduction between 2019 and 2020 is notable, but not yet cause for celebration. The child poverty rate would have increased from 2019 to 2020 had it not been for the implementation of COVID-19 income support programs. With the elimination and clawback of such supports, child poverty rates will likely return to pre-pandemic levels.
So as Heather mentioned, one of the key statistics that we focus on in this year's report is the impact of the COVID-19 transfers that families were eligible for. So on the left-hand side is the official rates that are published in our report, and then on the right-hand side is some customized data that we received from Statistics Canada. This shows that the child poverty rate in absence of any income supports such as CERB and the other income supports families were eligible for in 2020 upwards into 2021, the child poverty rate in New Brunswick would have been 24%, which is higher than what it was in 2019.
The child poverty rates in New Brunswick are unevenly distributed across its 8 cities, as you can see in this visual. The highest child poverty rates are above 20% in Campbellton, Bathurst, and St. John. St. John has the 3rd highest child poverty rate among cities in the province at 23.8%. The lowest child poverty rate is in Dieppe at 9.5%.
There are also quite stark differences between the city of St. John and its surrounding suburban towns, as I'm sure you're all aware of. So the city of St. John had a child poverty rate of 23.8%, with the next highest in the surrounding towns in our CMA being Rothesay at 10.5%, 9.5% in Hampton, and 7% in Quispamsis and Granby Westfield. This is quite common. We tend to see that the central city in a CMA does have a higher child poverty rate than the more suburban towns. However, the differences in the St. John CMA are quite stark, as I'm sure you all know.
Within St. John's city limits, there are notable differences in the spatial distribution of child poverty. This visual shows that the 2020 child poverty rates in wards 1 and 4 were below the provincial average, while wards 2 and 3 had rates that exceeded it. The child poverty rates in wards 2 and 3 were more than double the average child poverty rate in the province.
So that is a really quick highlight of the statistics that we thought would be, that would pertain to City Council. There are a number of other statistics and topics that are discussed in the report, such as populations that are adversely impacted, such as young children, children in one-parent families, Indigenous and racialized children, as well as a bunch of policy recommendations for the federal and provincial government. So we encourage you guys to take a look at the report, and if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you.
We certainly appreciate you coming in tonight for bringing us the presentation. It's interesting because, I know you talk about the monies that were received through some of the COVID, initiatives, et cetera. And I guess I would ask is, if you do see those changes come in, when you look out the actual changes in poverty, the money is a measurement of the level, but then the impact of that, what are we looking at? Well, probably years, I would think, for the impact of that. If you could lift families out of that through monies of some subsidies or some whatever programs that you would have, then, is there any sort of figures on how far out you would actually see the changes? Probably I'm assuming the next generation, maybe, I don't know. Or I don't know if you have the answer to that.
So I don't directly have the answer to that. We do know that there are generational effects of poverty, and we know that the further below the poverty line you are, naturally, the more money there needs to be to take you above the poverty line. We do have a section in the report that outlines the depth of poverty, so looking at the number of families that are and how far below that poverty line they are, because it's a very different story if, as you said, you're living just close to the poverty line and there can be a transfer that then lifts you out, versus if you are, for example, we talk about social assistance levels and how deep they push you into poverty in those situations. So there is a section that I think addresses your question in the report.
Okay, thank you. Deputy, I'm going to hand it to you first to say thank you to your guests. And thank you to you for bringing them into us.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Chelsea and Heather, look, thank you very much for bringing this in. It's a very high-level report, but it gives us an indication of how things are, not just here in St. John, but throughout our region as a whole. And, the mayor makes a good point. People have mentioned it about the CERB payment and so on and so forth. It does help people living in poverty, and I guess that strengthens the argument for a basic living wage in Canada, because if it works short-term like that, obviously you could expect long-term results. So I really want to thank you for coming in. I'm sure there's lots of comments and questions around the table, but I just wanted to get my opportunity in. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Harris, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering, has the HDC ever done a bit of a deep dive into the state of a neighborhood being a driver around poverty levels? So I'm talking specifically about the broken window theory and what level that plays upon community development, because that's always fascinated me as a theory and as a solution that can drive a type of revitalization in inner communities. So is there any tie that you guys have in research or data that has looked at that transfer or that reality between the state of a community and its level of dilapidation, its level of rundown reality, and the level of poverty that exists, and some of the driving factors around that. Also solutions to go after within that. Could be putting you on the spot a little bit, but I am curious.
I'm not aware if that research exists within our organization, but we could certainly check with Randy and the others that have been there longer than we have and get back to you.
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry, I don't know if I hit my button there or not, but yeah, I guess to me, it's like, it's always highlighting the gaps that exist in the research that need more information to make better decisions. Because we've talked about this around the table, like we don't know how much money comes into this city to try to alleviate poverty. And we don't have good eyesight into or sightline into where it's going, what neighborhoods, how it's being utilized. You've heard of things called social auditing for cities to be able to say, okay, out of all the different foundations, government funding streams, this is much comes into your city. This is where it's devoted to as far as a subject. I think that would be a fascinating perspective to have, because as we seek to grow and belong being our top priorities here at the City of St. John, this is data that I'm looking forward to say, how are we equitably funding parts of our city? Because not everybody needs the same attention. Right? Not everybody has the same amount of problem, therefore not everybody needs the same attention. So what level of attention are we giving these areas, and how different can the city interact? Anyway, this is all stuff I know we can't solve tonight, but it is a fascinating kind of deep dive into seeing two wards specifically within a city that is specifically different than the region. And so when you layer that out, it would be a powerful tool set to have at this level to drive growth conversations, community development. Be very fascinated to have that conversation more going forward. Thanks.
I'll leave that to you two to get back to Councillor Harris maybe on that. Councillor Ogden, over to you.
First, I'd like to thank you very much for coming in. And I've been doing food bank drives for a long time, and I know the importance of the Human Development Council. And I think I like stats and I like numbers. What you bring to it is exactly what's in your word, is the humanity behind the stats, because anybody can say numbers and throw them out and they mean nothing if you don't know what's behind those numbers. And you bring those numbers to us. We are often in discussion with the province still about our numbers. If you look at wards 2 and 3, it's about the same size as Dieppe. But Dieppe, which has the lowest number of people living in poverty, and we have the highest in those two. So when the province, for instance, is looking at Dieppe compared to Central St. John, those two wards, they should look at it very, very differently in funding. That doesn't happen because they just look at stats and they don't look at the makeup of stats. And so that's why we depend on you to give the true reality of what the stats are. And I thank you for that. And so it's very important. What Councillor Harris was talking about, in the early 1980s, the Japanese sat down with a lot of Americans and said, we can kind of tell you what's wrong with your cities. You have potholes, broken windows, and that's creating your higher crime rate and everything else. And the cities of New York in particular, people were leaving in mass, and the high crime rates and those types of things. So they started to take care of little things. Even the way police officers interacted, the way of broken windows, painting houses, picking up garbage. And they realized they saved a bundle of money. And I think that's what Councillor Harris was, the social impact of the poverty on a particular neighborhood. We paint most of our houses and clean most of our lots in wards 2 and 3. And there's a reason behind that. So it does have a very positive effect. But I really want to thank you, because we often get thrown the idea, well, with 3 cities and we have one policy. Well, one policy does not fit wards 2 and 3 for sure. And especially when you compare the poverty rate in Dieppe compared to ward 2 and 3. So I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I very much appreciate you both being here today. I'm I think one of many councillors and certainly staff around the table who use the Human Development Council as a resource consistently, whether it be information like this or homelessness or the work that you folks continue to do in the community. I wonder, anecdotally, we've heard a lot of whether it be impact from growth, impact from increasing rents, gentrification, what have you, that people are being outpriced out of neighborhoods and that our poverty is shifting into different areas where it may have been concentrated in different neighborhoods before. Do you have any indication as to whether or not that's actually happening and where you're seeing it?
So I think we'll better be able to answer that question in a couple years. So as you can notice, we're in 2023 presenting on the 2022 Child Poverty Report Card that uses data from 2020. So a lot of what you're talking about has happened, but we don't have the data to support that yet. So it will be really interesting to track the wards over the next 3 or 4 years to see if those trends that have happened post-pandemic with inflation and all the other things that have happened in the last couple years, if we're going to see that that shift make its way into those child poverty rate numbers or overall poverty rate as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important that we get as specific of data as we drive right down to ward breakdowns. I mean, like I think what needs to be made really clear is how the CMA is not reflective of the challenges that we are facing directly in this community. And when we look at the regional service and the regional group and that CMA potentially taking control of things like our housing agenda and all those efforts, I think that narrative needs to be driven over and over again to say the needs in our community are very different than the needs outside of the city proper. And I mean, when I look at my ward, you know, it's refreshing to see it up to 36%. Or sorry, down to 36% when it has, traditionally held around 1 in 2 kids that don't have food security or housing security. I think that's really important. But at the same time, overall, having 1 in 4 kids in our community as a whole, in our city as a whole, that don't have food security or housing security, I think is a decision that every person around this table needs to, or is a piece of information that every person around this table needs to hold when we make decisions. I know it's one that I do in representing Ward 3, and I think it's incredibly powerful. And certainly to Councillor Ogden, Councillor Harris's point, opportunities like our community reserve and our Building Safer Communities funding make sure that we can put a foot forward in terms of battling poverty from our perspective, because we do have those means to do so. And supporting our neighborhoods is what it's all about. So thanks very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Redwan.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to see the improvement in the numbers for sure. And I know you've highlighted that Ward 1 and Ward 4 numbers are lower. I still find them so high. So, I hope that, the numbers will get even better in the future. Have you gotten any indication as to what's really influencing the numbers? And I know CERB could be part of the positive uptake, but did you get any feeling when you were doing your research on what could have influenced it?
So I guess I just want to highlight when it comes to CERB, that was a customized tabulation from Statistics Canada. And what that showed, I know we showed the rates, but what that showed in raw numbers is that lifted just over 10,000 New Brunswick children out of poverty. And the message that we have in our report is that was a temporary support. That's no longer in place. Mm-hmm. So we are likely going to see those numbers kind of rebound to pre-pandemic levels. Sure. We also know that other transfers that make a difference, like the Canada Child Benefit, for example, that usually lifts upwards of 10,000 or more children out of poverty. That's now being clawed back as a form of CERB repayment. So in addition to them likely rebounding, there's a situation where they could be worse. And as I was mentioning earlier with Councillor Hickey's question, time will tell. We need a couple more years of data to be able to fully look at that picture. And now I'm forgetting exactly what you asked me.
No, that's okay. I was just wondering if you had anything that you thought you could see from your research that would be influencing it. And that's a great answer. But the other thing that's in your report that I'd love for residents to take a look at is the senior rates. Hovering right around 17%. I think after doing so much for the community for so many years, to have our senior poverty rates at those levels is just so high. So anyway, and I do wonder if you have any idea about our racialized communities.
You're wondering what influences?
Yeah, racialized communities, I'm wondering if you have any idea, like where their poverty rate, like overall poverty rate would be sitting at. And that might change because of course our population has grown.
I don't have my report with me, but.
That's, I don't,
Yeah, but there is a section with detailed explanation about the racialized population, and
Okay.
it's explaining systemic racism and how those structural factors play into this overrepresentation of racialized children in poverty.
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to help people find work because they're having a hard time to get jobs, so I'm assuming that this is probably a huge issue. Anyway.
Counselor, can
thank
I
you
come
very
back to
much.
you? You're over
Yeah,
your 3
no,
minutes.
that's fine. Thank you, yeah.
Would you like back on, Counselor Norton?
Thank you, Worship. Chelsea Heather, the St. John Human Development Council, Randy Hatfield, and your organization have been longtime partners with the municipality and friends. So I want to thank you for coming back and for at least my time here, coming back again and again and again. I've got one question. Actually, I've got two questions. One, in the last 2 pages of the report, I've always found this interesting, but this isn't to deflate the importance of the report. Why is there never in the conclusion and recommendations a "we urge the municipal government to"? There's always a "we urge the federal government to," and there's always a "we urge the provincial government to." Yet we report to the municipal councils. We even break it down into wards, and I know we do that on a provincial level. If I could encourage you to do one thing, because my follow-up question is, what more can we do as a municipality? And some of the things that you ask the provincial government to, for example, the rent cap, affordable housing, are all initiatives that the city, just not us, Fredericton, Moncton, smaller municipalities, endeavor to do and have even driven resources in that direction. I'll encourage you as the authors going forward to put a heading in there, "We urge the municipality to." It's something we can hang our hat on, and so that when we're reading this, that we are an equal shareholder in that responsibility, that we can't just be dismissive of what you're reporting and say, that's the job of the province, that's the job of the federal government. Seeing us in there as a title in the last 2 pages of that report, I think can bring more of a shared ownership and responsibility to it. And I think there's things that the municipality can do, whether it's in duplicate or in partnership with the other levels of government. That's it. With that, is there anything off the cuff that you would say, other than bringing awareness to it by you being here? That's one thing that we can do. Thank you to our deputy. Is there anything else that we can do to go ahead and take a bite out of these rates and move it in the direction of Gulf?
So first of all, I really appreciate that feedback and that question. So to answer as to why it's not included, we've talked over the years whether to include it or not to include it. And a lot of it comes down to just as we showed in the CMA slide, for example, the asks for municipalities would be very different depending on which municipality you're sitting on. So it's always been a little bit complex on how do we go about this, but I think that's really good feedback, and it would be really good for us to think of some broad asks that could be asked of every municipality. So again, I really appreciate that feedback.
I think we can get there. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I think we can get there. After all, we are the St. John Human Development Council. And that's not that we're not the greater St. John, because you're reporting on a regional basis. Quispam-Cis is a partner in this. They have a responsibility in lowering our collective numbers. Rossay, Grand Bay, St. Martin's, like we are a region. I think that there's things in there that we can report that are dedicated to this region that we can begin to do. And you're right, it's going to take a customized approach, and it will for some of the other human development councils as it relates to their partner municipalities as well. I thank you for being here. You did a wonderful report. I know I can say this, this is being read widely, especially within some of the other schools, for instance, whether you're community school coordinators, whether you're educators, social workers, nurses. It's a very important report.
Counselor, can I
And
come?
thank you. I'm
Oh, I was
done.
going to say, can I come back
I'm
around to
done.
you?
Nope, that's it. That's my 3 minutes, Your Worship.
Yeah, it's over that.
For probably the next council meeting too. Here we go.
Counselor Ogden, over to you again.
Just one note from what the mayor was asking. I read a report today that the Americans are doing some numbers. They just dropped their CERB numbers, and 42 million more Americans tomorrow will be going to food banks as opposed to last week because they just dropped their CERB. And I don't know how fast the reporting is in Canada, but we're 1/8 of the population. So maybe you can do something with that. So when taxes are spent in your community, and one of the reasons I say that, getting to, is that we generate a lot of tax dollars in St. John that don't stay here, that could go to our schools or university, all kinds of things that defeat poverty. So if those tax dollars that are generated in St. John could stay here, we could probably see a lowering of our poverty rate in St. John, because those are tax dollars that are already here, not that we're asking for more, but those are tax dollars that are already here and generated. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Well, I guess that's it for questions. Thank you again for being here this evening. Thank Randy for giving you the night off so that you come here and speak to us this evening. Really appreciate it. Lots of good information in there for us. And as Counselor Norton said, that report will get read by, it's very interesting information. So thanks again and appreciate you being here. So I will take a motion to receive for information the deputy and Counselor Lowe on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Next on the agenda is item 12.1. It's an update on select catalytic projects and advocacy by the CAO.
Over to you.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council. So this item is a standing item on your agenda to provide selected progress updates as it relates to council's catalytic growth initiatives. And just as a recap, council did endorse 8 catalytic growth initiatives, 4 infrastructure priorities and 4 advocacy priorities. And this evening I have updates for council on 4 of council's catalytic growth initiatives. The first update is related to the Innovative Central Peninsula Learning Commons. There has been significant progress on this file with the province's announcements related to 2 new schools. The city has been actively engaged with the province and the District Education Council on school planning committee which was established by the province. The education specifications for the Peninsula School are nearing completion, and they will be finalized later this month and presented to the District Education Council for approval. So in terms of timelines, it's anticipated that the design of the new school this process for that will start in May or June of this year, and with completion of the school targeted for September of 2026. So that significant progress is being made on that file. In terms of the funding for the community hub, there is active work underway to develop a funding plan to support the enhancements required to the school. The next update is related to the new comprehensive recreation and arts facility. Work continues on the part of staff to scope out the concept for the multipurpose recreation facility, and this is being informed by both best practices and community needs. And staff are also investigating funding opportunities with other levels of government. My third update is related to investment in industrial parks. Working with our consultants, Deloitte, work is completed on a value chain analysis for the St. John Industrial Parks. And in mid-February, these findings were presented to the city's project and advisory teams. The work did provide a detailed description of St. John Industrial Park's competitive advantages, including its unique ability to offer water, air, rail, and inland transportation access. Building on this work, staff have started working on 5 unique work streams, which were identified by the study, so actively working on implementation. And we are working closely with Envision St. John, the province, the port, and Laurenville Mechanical to execute the work streams identified by our consultants. And this work is in addition to the work on the development of the 10-year strategic plan for St. John Industrial Parks. A key component of the overall strategy, the city will be working with stakeholders and subject matter experts to develop a range of new and updated marketing assets, which include a new website, which is targeted to launch in April of 2023. And my final update is around affordable housing, and the city has been active in working the affordable housing file on many fronts. The city has developed and endorsed a new affordable housing grant program, and Growth Committee is presenting a small amendment to the policy later this evening. The city has been working with the non-for-profit sector to prepare applications for the CMHC Rapid Housing Initiative, and council will be making a decision on this later this evening. The city's community planning team has been working through a number of planning applications for developments containing affordable housing units, and the February 7th Planning Advisory Committee meeting was almost exclusively focused on affordable housing. And tonight you gave reading to a text amendment for converted accommodations, which will unlock the potential for spurring more affordable housing in St. John. The city has been actively participating on numerous discussions with the province and 8 cities of New Brunswick on all areas of the housing spectrum, and has shared our affordable housing action plan and needs assessment with the Minister of Housing. Recently, the city participated in a workshop with the province on February 16th to discuss issues related to housing. And of course, the province announced just this past week the creation of a New Brunswick Housing Corporation, which will consolidate provincial services under one roof. The city is also currently scoping work on council's direction to investigate a municipal housing entity, and will be reporting to Growth Committee at its next meeting. And finally, the city has begun preliminary work on the homelessness strategy for the city, and are in active discussions with the province, the Salvation Army, on the operation of the Out of the Cold shelter at the Ballier Arena in order to extend it till the end of April. And subject to any questions, that concludes my update for council tonight, and before you for receive and file.
Thank you so much. So as you can hear, there is a lot going on in St. John, and St. John is in a leadership position in a lot of these items. But I do have a couple of comments or questions here. Councillor Hickey, over to you first, and then Councillor Harris.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I would contend to you that this is probably the first time, as we lead up to International Women's Day, that senior staff occupied around this table are 50% women. I think that's pretty. I think that's. I would say it's a new for us. Jacqueline, could you just clarify the intended date for the school opening?
September 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harris?
Really excited about that value chain analysis. I was out to the airport recently with some folks, and I know the airport has some pretty interesting plans that they'll be releasing to the public. I'm wondering, this value chain analysis, if there's an opportunity to dovetail some of the analysis they're going to be putting into out there, or if we've been asked about that, if there's already work happening around that front, because there is some pretty substantial shifts happening on that front, and there's some interesting new business in town, I think, that's interested in being there. So there's just a few pieces to the puzzle, and I know that the port and this value chain analysis was the main focus of that is for our industrial parks. I'm just wondering about the connection piece to the airport.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Harris, I can share that there is strong alignment. Certainly we are, as a senior level, exploring opportunities with the strategic plan, the value chain analysis, and the work that's happening at the airport, and senior staff have been in active discussions with the airport on their expansion plans to coordinate work with our strategic plan.
Okay, yeah, that's really what I was, because I know it's the industrial park strategic plan, and we kind of started with the port, but as long as that connection's been made, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lowe.
Back to the industrial park. The program that we paid for, has that been decided and given to staff? There was a report in the industrial park being done, correct?
Your worship, through you to the councillor, I know there are various stages to the work being conducted with respect to St. John Industrial Parks. The initial stages were around just physical improvements, and that work is underway. And the value chain analysis is the work that's completed now. And I understand this will lead to further work around a broader 10-year strategic plan. I do know that Jacqueline Boucher is joining us virtually and certainly can add further detail to that initial commentary, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, I'm curious when the reports are coming back to open council. That's what I'm curious about.
Through you, Your Worship, Councillor, the intent is to bring the strategic plan to council, and it will have been informed by the value chain analysis, but I see that Ms. Boucher has put her camera on, so I'm happy to have her pipe in on this question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to the councillor, we did brief, as noted by the CAO during her update, we did brief the project team, which is made up of staff and the advisory oversight committee, also made up of staff, earlier this month. The intention is that the value chain analysis will eventually be presented through growth committee to council in the process of moving forward with the strategic plan. So it is intended to move forward through growth committee. Thank you.
In other words, it'll be presented to growth committee at the next growth committee meeting?
Do we know the time frame for that?
We haven't, due to some staff vacations, we haven't been able to figure out the exact date that this will go to growth committee, but we do hope it'll happen in the near future.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. All right, so I need a motion to receive for information. Councillor Hickey and Councillor Harris on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is item 12.2. This is the Community Grants Program for 2023.
CAO, over to you.
Yes, Your Worship, members of council, before you this evening are recommendations from the Community Grants Committee of Council for the allocation of $184,000 in funding to 23 organizations for this year. The Community Grants Committee has the challenging task of reviewing community grant applications and making recommendations to council on the allocation of these funds, aligned with your community grants policy and council priorities to support valuable community programming throughout 2023. And with that as an introduction, I'll turn it over to Kara Coase, who's our Senior Manager of Community Support Services, to provide an overview of the recommendations before you this evening.
All right, over to you as soon as you're there we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton, Your Worship, members of council. The Community Grant Program was adopted by council in 2014 to support local nonprofit groups that promote healthy, active, and inclusive communities through the delivery of social, cultural, and recreational activities. There are 3 categories within the Community Grants Program: organizational support, community projects, and special events. The Community Grants Evaluation Committee, comprised of 2 community members, 2 staff, and 2 council members, are responsible for evaluating applications on fiscal responsibility, organizational strengths, community and social impact, and alignment with council and city priorities. There were new and returning applicants this year, with initiatives ranging from small-scale projects such as small concert series to large-scale community events. The committee was excited with the evolution of applications for new proposals and continuing initiatives providing extensive and valuable programming, projects, events, and supports for the St. John community throughout 2023. The Evaluation Committee reviewed 33 grant applications for 2023 and are recommending 23 grant applications for approval.
Thank you very much. I will just add for the public that that little kitty has $184,000 in it. That's all, but we had, I think, requests for just over $380,000. So I know it's not easy, and I know you have a set of guidelines, and you have a good team that have gone through all of the applications. So appreciate your guidance and leadership on this. So I have a couple of questions for you, Councillor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Lambert. I appreciate that. I just had a couple of questions for you. So I know that you're looking at the grant policy, right, when you're looking at this. Just wondering, what kind of evaluation are you doing when you're trying to choose and trying to figure out who should be getting and who shouldn't be?
So as per the, through your worship to Councillor.
There it is, it's on.
As per the policy, it was approved in fall of 2022, and this is the first round of applications that the full policy was put into effect. And within that policy, there's certain eligibility criteria that is followed through that. The committee members would then discuss through following those eligibility requirements or criteria to be able to then evaluate whether the applicants are eligible for the funding first, and then after they go through that piece, looking at the other criteria as well.
That's great. And I think my next question is I'm just wondering if there is something that is against the grant policy that the application comes in, is the application possibly sent back and are they given an opportunity to change their application so that they can fit within the grant policy if they're able to? You know, maybe they end up taking a piece out. So for example, if there's a fundraising piece, for example, in there, and they shouldn't be doing that, but maybe that's not the main part of the application, like, is that something that staff are doing?
Once the policy is completed for the additional funds, then we'd be able to look at how that could move forward, whether or not we would relook at the other folks who were not approved at this point, or put a submission out for new applicants as well.
I'm assuming after tonight they'd get feedback on why they didn't get approved anyway,
Yes,
right?
after council approves, then we are able to notify all the applicants.
Sure. The only other thing I wanted to say, Mayor, is that I'd love to see this pocket of money increase next year. This is one of those things that I really wanted to take a deep dive into the budget about. So just my food for thought, because it's not a lot of money, and I know these not-for-profits are just stretching it out, which is wonderful. And there's so much good done in the community. So I'd love to empower them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Money is empowering, and we need more of it because we'd like to expand all of our grant programs. Councillor Hickey.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. On that note, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of these community grants in action, and the impact that this small pot of money has is significant in our community. These organizations use that funding to leverage more funding from whether it be other levels of government or private sponsorship. I want to thank Councillor Ogden and Councillor Stewart for the work that goes into this. I've been around the table in that committee before, and it's a lot of effort. So thank you, and thanks to staff as well. These are very, very impactful, and I hope, like both Your Worship, you and Councillor Radwan mentioned, I hope growth of this fund continues moving forward, because if we've got asks for $300,000, the need in the community is out there, and hopefully we can continue to try and match that.
380.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I will take a motion on the deputy and Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next on the agenda is item 13.1, submission by the Growth Committee, Affordable Housing Grant Program Policy Amendment.
Councillor Killen, over to you as the chair of that committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. So at our February meeting, the Growth Committee endorsed an amendment brought forward to the recently adopted Municipal Affordable Housing Grant Program. This amendment ensures that projects currently undergoing a planning approval process, such as rezoning, can be given due consideration by the Grant Evaluation Committee with the first grant cycle to receive conditional approval. Several projects have already applied for planning approvals prior to seeking grant funding and met the objectives of the policy, in particular, project readiness. This amendment will ensure the policy wording aligns with the policy objectives. It also ensures that the grant program is capable of supporting timely funding initiatives such as the Rapid Housing Initiative projects. No other changes are proposed to the grant policy at this time, and staff is available if there are any detailed questions.
I'll get you to read did you read the recommendation?
Oh, I will right now. One moment, please. Okay, so we move staff recommendation to amend the affordable housing grant policy.
Okay, Councillor Hickey's the seconder on it. On the question, I have a question from Councillor Radwan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick comment. I just wanted to, I know that the growth committee had put a little change in there that they could go over the 250,000 cap, and that's fine if there's a good business case. But I do hope that they're going to be keeping in mind with the recommendations coming forward that we're hoping that, yes, some might go to affordable housing, some might go to minimum standards, some might go to community development officer. So we kind of stretch that into a few different programs. So anyway, just wanted to comment on that. I'm excited to see the program going forward, though.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder with the motions on the floor. On the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item, City Clerk.
Next item is 13.2 on the agenda, another growth committee submission. This one is Community Services Reserve.
Back to you, Councillor Killen.
Thank you. You can always tell when we had growth committee meetings. So this one, we're pleased to recommend a new policy for the Community Services Reserve for Council's consideration. You may recall Council allocated $800,000 in initial seed funding for this reserve as part of the 2023 operating budget. This new reserve will provide additional flexibility for the growth committee and ultimately council to support innovation, piloting, and testing new one-time initiatives intended to improve quality of life and enhance inclusion or community development in St. John. Growth Committee reviewed the matter at its open session meeting on February 22nd and endorsed the policy while directing staff to bring the policy to council with an amendment to permit expenditures to exceed a $250,000 funding limit with a substantiated business case. The report also outlines the availability of other reserves and other grants in 2023 for additional context. So I would move the staff recommendation that we establish this fund in an initial seed funding just move staff recommendation on this.
Okay. Deputy, did you say you were seconding that? Good. Okay, on the question? Any questions? I have a couple of, no, I don't have a question. Wait, yeah, I do have a question. Hickey, Councillor Hickey.
Thanks, Your Worship. My apologies if I missed it. But can you just clarify, perhaps Chair Killen or staff, how that fund's being driven, like where initiatives are coming from for that fund?
Your Worship, the initiatives will come from alignment with council priorities. So there are a number of initiatives that came up during the budget deliberation process that were certainly seen as gaps in terms of quality of life related supports in the community. So we will be reviewing those with Growth Committee, and certainly there is other opportunity for other partnerships as well to come forward. And we certainly with the change, there is a change that's been made to the policy as well to provide some additional flexibility around the cap amount, so that will provide additional consideration as well.
But it'll be largely staff-driven.
Largely staff-driven. There is the opportunity for some third-party requests that are aligned with council priorities, but largely staff-driven. You're right.
That's just what I was looking for. Thanks, Jacqueline.
All right, the motion is on the floor. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Growth Committee. Next item, City Clerk.
Next is item 5.4 from the consent agenda that was removed.
Okay.
This would now be 14.1, and it's a report entitled Engineering Services Retail Drive Intersection Realignment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart?
I have a question for city staff.
Oh, okay, sorry. Over to you.
So we've all voted in favor of this realignment. I see no reason why we're not going to vote in favor of this engineering design tonight. However, I want to know if city staff has done or given any consideration to the 30-year business owner that is directly impacted by this realignment, and saying that his business, if once this is all done, will be largely impacted by traffic flow and being able to move transport trucks in his yard. So I think at the engineering stage, I'm not interested in getting into a long debate about this tonight, but because this is engineering and design, I think now we need to consider his needs so that his business can continue to exist. Has any consideration been given to that?
If you want to just hold on for a second, Mike Baker is going to answer the questions on some of this. And I think that has all been, oh, here, I thought you were going to be virtual tonight, Mr. Baker. Excellent. Nice to see you in person.
Through your worship to the councillor, at this point, we haven't necessarily worked with we're actually starting the design process. So when we go into the design process, we'll be talking to the landowners about their needs and any issues that are arised that come up.
Okay.
So that will start once EXP starts doing their work.
I'm glad to hear it. That's why I wanted to bring it up tonight, the very onset of this.
Councillor Lowe, you're up next. Wait till we get
Just
you ready.
stand there for a sec, right. So this is in my writing, and I have met this gentleman on 3 or 4 different occasions with Councillor Stewart. He was here when they did the announcement right outside the doors here, right? And I went to Tim about it. I'm sorry, Tim. And it looks like, I mean, I'm all for the coming down the hill and going straight across too. But it looks like we're giving the land, that street, to the Northrips possibly. And there's a sign going right in the middle of the street, of that street. But he has to back his tractor trailer into that street to get to his back of his business. He can't go the other side. The only way he can do it is backing in the street where the cars come down now. And, you know, he's really upset and worried about his business, to the fact that he came here the day that the government announced the money. And I went to Tim and I explained it all to him. And you're right, the engineers are just starting to do, but I would really, really appreciate if they go to the store, they sit down with him, he's there all the time, he works it himself, or he works it all the time, to get him to explain, maybe the tractor only got to go over so far. I mean, I don't know, but I don't want to see the man run out of business for something that we're doing, because the bottom line is this council closes that street. And if council here doesn't vote to close the street don't get closed. So, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and I really appreciate if you go talk to that gentleman.
Councillor, I'm going to hand it over to General Counsel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to caution council about the nature of the discussion. We're having an open session about something that could have an impact on the city's interest, so cautioning council on that discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And really, this item tonight is really for us to agree to the funding for EXP to go forward with this design work, so we're not there with all of the other stuff. Councillor Harris.
Point of clarity, Your Worship, it wasn't a unanimous decision on this one. So I didn't vote in favor, and I won't be voting in favor tonight. But
all right, sounds good.
Thanks.
All right, so I'll call the question. We have the motion on the floor. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Harris voting opposed. Motion carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Radwan. All right. Next item, City Clerk.
Thank you. Next item is item 15.1 on your agenda under general correspondence, and it's a letter from C&M Osborne with respect to feedback on WasteWise program, and there is a recommendation to refer this letter to the CAO.
Who's recommending? Deputy, I need a seconder on that. Councillor Hickey on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item.
Next is item 15.2. It's a submission, a request for sponsorship, St. John Union Basketball. There's a recommendation to receive for information.
I will mention that the staff either has or will be reaching out to this group to connect with them and to provide some recommendations for pass for sponsorship as well. So it's receive and file for us, but staff is going to be taking that over. So I've got a motion from Councillor Killen, and you just say the deputy on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, City Clerk.
And the final item is a motion that came from closed session on rapid housing initiatives. And I have the wording from that right here, which I can read. So the motion would read as follows. Direct the Chief Administrative Officer to submit applications to Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation Rapid Housing Initiative Round 3 Project Stream on behalf and with consent of the following nonprofit organizations to all terms and conditions of the City, Kaleidoscope Impact, Unified St. John Housing Co-op, Housing Alternatives, John Howard Society. Number 2, further direct the Chief Administrative Officer to negotiate back-to-back agreements and any amendments or consents arising from them with identified nonprofit housing organizations to distribute CMHC Rapid Housing Initiative funding should the applications be successful and returned to council with said agreements for approval, and authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a CMHC integrity declaration on behalf of the City of St. John, generally in the form as attached to M&C 2023-53.
Okay, I have the deputy moving it and Councillor Hickey seconding it on the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Councillor Lowe, I'll take a motion to adjourn. From Councillor Lowe. Seconder? I need a seconder on that. Councillor Killen, thank you. On the question, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to staff. Thanks for all your great work. And to everyone, you can see that the team is really working. I mean, just the initiatives that Ms. Hamilton went through tonight, a lot of stuff happening here in St. John. Thanks so much and good night.